thank you, first of all, for joining us on the webinar. I've never done one of these before, so I hope it goes really well. I really hope you enjoy it. And look, I've even made you a little poll. So if you want to take part in this, you can. Which sector of the motorsport industry interests you the most? Just to, have a little bit of fun. So feel free to get involved. There's a lot of you voting. That's good stuff. Okay, so I'll leave that there and we'll come back to it at the end. So today, let me introduce you to everyone that we have lined up for you. We're going to have Zarah Al-Kudcy is going to join us at 11:30 to talk about her role as Head of Commercial Partnerships at Formula One. But I'm delighted to say we have at the start, and to join us for the session, Sam Collins, who is a technical journalist in Formula One, but also works with the Japanese a lot, doing Super Formula and all sorts. So if you want to get into the world of journalism or tech journalism, Sam is a good person to talk to. Tim Silvey is next up. He is a marketing and sponsorship man, really, but he has, like most of us, many strings to his bow. We also have Rebecca Banks, who does lots of PR and comms. So if you're sort of person that would like to work with drivers or teams, then she does that as well as many other things. Jack Nicholls, who is a drummer. No, he likes to drum. He's very good at drumming. You can all take your sound off if you want. We can interact a little bit if you want. Take your mutes off. So yes, Jack is obviously commentator. He does FE and F1, GTs, you name it, he does it all. Jack's still not unmuted himself, but that's fine. And lastly, Neil Cole, who is presenter extraordinaire of Motorsport, but not F1, because we wanted someone who wasn't F1 on here. So hi, gang.
Good morning.
Hello.
Morning all.
Nice to hear you back and not just my voice. That's fabulous. So I just think it's worth us kind of setting out who we are and actually what our job involves and probably how we got to do our job. So let's start with, I'm going to go clockwise on my screen. I have no idea how you're seeing this, but I'm going to go clockwise and start with Sam Collins. So Sam, just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got your job.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. So I'm Formula One TV's technical analyst, which means I spend much of my life staring at pictures of very small pieces of racing car and then trying to explain what they do without any real data, then trying to get a lot of data from the teams that they don't want me to have. So that's largely what I do for a living. Then I also write articles in Japanese, even though I don't speak Japanese, about the very same subject, and then shout a lot at racing cars in Japan on various television channels and YouTube channels. My career, though, wasn't really a sort of media-based one. I actually did engineering at university, and before that, I didn't do A-levels. I did a national diploma in motorsport engineering. So I spent my, when everybody else was sort of doing A-levels and going to college, I was building racing cars and going off and playing with them on racetracks, and that was a lot of fun. Then I got a job at Haymarket Publishing, which used to own Motorsport News and Autosport magazines. And I was the technical ad sales guy. So I'd go in there and I'd sell adverts to companies that made very small bits of racing car. And then the editorial team realized they had somebody in the office who understood small bits of racing car and asked me to write about small bits of racing car. And so I started writing that way. And then it sort of went on to become a career. But I mean, I started off on, in muddy forests on the British Rally Championship and on the Ankara Championship, then going to Formula Ford races, really just grafting my way up from the bottom, and then eventually did end up in Formula One in about 2005. But the first thing I did to get into motorsport, the very, very first step, was I just wrote loads of letters to teams. And I just asked them, when I was 16 years old, I asked them, can I come and do work experience? Because I don't want to work at the local golf club for 2 weeks. I want to go and do something that actually interests me. And amazingly enough, Williams, who were then the world champions, wrote back and said, yeah, sure, come along and work in our wiring department. And I ended up making bits with Jacques Villeneuve and Heinz-Harald Frenzen's cars. And from there on, just sort of stuck with Formula One. It seemed to work out.
I think you've just made a lot of people watching very
That's amazing, yeah.
Isn't it just? Truly brilliant, and I love that. And who knows where the future goes for you next. It's a great way of getting in. So hopefully that's inspired some of you with Sam's story. Now, Tim, let's come to you next, because I guess your story might be a little bit different.
Yeah, so thanks, Jenny, and thanks for putting this on. motorsport, obviously we're all in it. It's a brilliant industry. It's often out of reach for a lot of people, or perceived out of reach. So I think this is a great thing to do. So I've worked in motorsport really with a focus on Formula One sponsorship and marketing for about the last 15 years or so, and more recently in Formula E. I left uni with a very underwhelming qualification and fell into recruitment, as I think many people do, with no real plan. However, I knew I loved motorsport and it was something I wanted to get into. And I knew a guy who ran an agency in Formula One, which at the time was called Bodansky Sponsorship Limited, which no longer exists under that name. But they were a long-standing supplier to the Toyota F1 team and Panasonic, who were the title sponsor at the time. So he, after some begging, lots of begging, he gave me a 3-month probation to see what I could do. I left my recruitment job, started on very, very little money. But I've always had a good work ethic, and I was often first in, last out. I'd go above and beyond to learn and suck up to the boss, make him tea and toast and learn the ropes and involve myself in everything and as much as I could in the business. And passed the probation, stayed at the company for about 6 years. And then by the time I left, I was a director and shareholder and helped to open an office in Abu Dhabi, and had worked with Toyota and ING Bank, with Renault F1 during Crashgate in Singapore. In some very fetching bright orange ING coloured trousers, consultancy at Yas Marina Circuit, and loads of cool sponsorships, and attended most of the races every year in F1. And then in 2012, set up on my own and moved into racing driver management, looked after a roster of about 5 drivers from F1 and Le Mans prototypes to British touring cars and junior single-seaters, taking care of their sponsorship and PR and digital and marketing and so on. And then since then, started a motorsport podcast, website and app called Motormouth. And we're launching season 5 of the podcast with Mark Webber in a couple of weeks' time.
Still won't be as good as me as a guest, Tim.
Won't be as good as you. We had you on. I'm earmarking Jack as well. I'm going to tap him up after this. Yeah, so we're launching that in the 5th series of that in a couple of weeks with Mark. And when I'm not doing that, I consult for a company called Right Formula, who are a leading sports marketing and sponsorship consultancy based in London, founded by a guy called Robin Fennick, who might be familiar to some people. He's a good guy to know. So for those out there just starting in the industry that want to have an interest in sports marketing, he's a good guy to make yourself familiar with. And I've worked with them on things like Epsom's sponsorship of Mercedes, Hilton's sponsorship of McLaren, and more recently, Genpac's sponsorship of EVR in Formula E.
It's certainly a healthy list of people that you've worked with, and you must have the biggest contact book of all of us, I think, with that.
It's getting there. It's getting there. It's not quite Bernie Ecclestone level, but it's coming along.
Good stuff. Thank you, Tim. Right, on to Jack then. Jack Nicholls. Who are you and what do you do?
Hello, everyone. I'm Jack, it says on the screen. And I commentate on Formula E for the TV, and on Formula One for BBC Radio 5 Live and the F1 app. And basically, I got into it because I screwed up my A-levels when I was 18. I was meant to get an A in maths and go to university. Got a D, which apparently is worse, and then they don't let you into university. So I had a year where I was working at my local Sainsbury's on the checkouts, and I really liked motorsport. Like, I grew up loving motorsport. I wanted to be a commentator since I was 6, but like in the same way you want to be a astronaut, you know, you don't actually think you're gonna do it. And then while I was working at Sainsbury's, I studied marshalling, so dressing up, you know, in the full orange and standing by the track and picking up cars when they crash and stuff like that. And when I was doing that, they had these commentators on like the public address systems, and I thought, oh, well, I'd quite like to do that. So I started doing that sort of voluntary style, and then it just kept going. While I then went to university, I did some retakes and stuff. Went to university. While I was there, I started commentating on local race things. I started doing the Mazda MX-5 championship on Motors TV, which was a television channel back in the olden days, and all things like that. I started doing Formula 2, then I started doing the FIA GT World Championship, and then Formula E came along and they asked me to do it, and so I did it. And then that was sort of 6 years ago, and still doing the same things with Formula E and Formula 1. So yeah, love it, and it's just a lot of fun, really. It's the best thing ever.
You sell it well, Jack. It sounds good.
Yeah,
You
it's
also get
great.
to work with me, so I apologise.
Yeah.
Not every job has all of it as a plus.
In fact, at this time on a Friday, I'd normally be listening to you two doing free
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
So what's going on?
We're not just missing free practice to speak to you guys, although it would be tempting. But yeah, it's a 2-day weekend, isn't it, Jack? Which is weird because we've never actually done that in a proper formatted, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, not on purpose. So it's very interesting. Normally when we've had a 2-day weekend before, we've just been filling time now on the radio. So it's going to be a lot of fun this weekend. So yeah, if you listen on BBC 5 Live this weekend, BBC Sport website, just mute Sky.
We've actually started doing a clock count. So people can mute Sky and actually have it running parallel. So that's good. Good to know. Right, thank you, Jack. Next up, let's go to Rebecca Banks. Rebecca, please tell us, in your beautifully symmetrical house, what it's all about. Who are you? What are you doing?
I always feel really guilty talking about it when I do things like this with a group of people, and they've gone, I wanted to be in motorsport since I was 6. I wanted to, I came out of the womb and I wanted to be in motorsport. And I have to admit, I knew nothing about it before I worked in it. So it always makes me feel really guilty because sort of 20 years down the line, I can't get out now. But no, I absolutely knew nothing about it. I didn't fail my A-levels, but I just gave up halfway through because I was terribly bored. I'm not condoning walking out of your education halfway through. It's a good message to say if things don't go the way you maybe planned them, it isn't always the end of the world. And yeah, I wanted to work in football. Couldn't find anybody that knew anybody. Couldn't get any work. But there was the Subaru World Team is based very near to where I grew up, and there was a role going there, and I applied for it. And they said, oh no, we're kind of looking for somebody that's kind of had that's on their second job. So I offered to just go and do some work experience, and I did. And I was working directly for David Richards, who's the head of ProDrive, and he offered me the job at the end of 2 weeks work experience. So yeah, I was at the Subaru World Rally team for 4 years doing marketing and PR. And then I applied for a job at the BAR Formula One team, and I got that job as a press officer. So I was over there for a while. That was in the days of Jacques Villeneuve and Jenson Button, and then later on Takuma Sato. And then I was kind of like, I think I need to do something different. I don't want to get like really niche and boxed in of only doing motorsport, because I still had in my mind that it was just a kind of a bit of a filler for me, and I really still wanted to go and do football. So I went off and worked at a football club for a while, and I was like, oh yeah, no, this is nowhere near as cool as motorsport. It was, I'd kind of gone around for 5 or 6 years working with kind of international media and very, very cool stuff. And then actually, if you work in football, I'm not trying to do down football, but it's a very kind of local level of interest the majority of the time. So it was a very different experience in the PR and marketing world, motorsport to football. So after that, I actually went freelance, and my very first client was Nelson Piquet Jr., who is still my client today, actually, 16 years now. So like, yeah, crazy. And yeah, I was freelance for a number of years, doing lots of different stuff for racing drivers and racing teams and sponsors on the kind of PR and events side of things. And then about 8-9 years ago, I met a very like-minded lady who we went into business together, and we set up a small PR agency. And yeah, we kind of do the same things, motorsport and a little bit of kind of automotive entertainment stuff. So yeah, we keep busy. We're involved in lots of things. So we do Formula One at the moment, Formula E and esports. So we're across those different elements in motorsport.
Fascinating, isn't it? There's never a real, I think, set approach or a set way into this industry. And I think that's the thing we're going to learn through this webinar. If you do want to use social media, then the hashtag we've created for this is MMW2020, which stands for the Motorsport Media Webinar. Last but not least, Neil Cole, tell us about yourself and the avocado plant positioned behind you.
Well, you can go to my YouTube channel and see how you do that. Talking of unorthodox routes into motorsport, let's talk to Neil. So I just wanted to there's already a question in the chat, which is really nice, about transferable skills. And the first time I worked with you, Rebecca, was in Berlin about 3 years ago, and we had to problem solve how we were going to throw Felix Rosenqvist out of a plane to do a skydive. And I hadn't worked with you, but it was like, oh, you're like-minded, let's just problem solve. And, you know, we got it done. And that's, you know, that can apply to any work situation, but it just
that was my first day on the job with that client, and I had to throw a racing driver out of an airplane.
Yeah, but we made it happen. It wasn't really him. Anyway, so my routine, having always been a huge motorsport fan, was weirdly, you know, through acting and presenting, and a presenting job came up in 2004, which happened to be a really amazing gig on the World Rally Championship. And that sort of set me down a sort of a sliding doors path on which I am still now. So I've worked for World Rally Championship, World Rallycross, World Touring Cars, Dakar, Race of Champions, Le Mans World Endurance. So I worked across all the main sort of top FIA championships, except for Formula One, World Series by Renault. I do a lot of stuff with Ken Block and the Hoonigan Industries YouTube world. But just generally, I kind of nowadays I'm kind of 50-50 on camera and behind the scenes, do a lot of writing and producing esports, as well as motorsport and lots of other things as well. But my route into it was very much, my skill set was presentational, and it just kind of got transplanted and applied to motorsport, which suited me because I was a fan.
Right, so you are introduced to our panel, and you can see, as we said, there are lots of ways into this fabulous industry. There are so many different roles in this industry as well, which means that there are opportunities. But I want to take some of your questions. So hopefully, we're going to go to the first one, which is from David Fernandez. So thank you for getting in touch. If you do want to use the Q&A, I promise we're going to try and get to as many as we can. But he asks, I'm a journalist and want to get involved in motorsport. What should I do first? So this is a question that we've had a lot, and thank you to all of you who have got in touch via email as well, because we had loads of questions in overnight. And I think everybody is desperate to know what's the first thing they should do, what's the best route in. So I wonder who we should start with. Let's go with Tim. What would your advice be for people who have they have qualified, so they've already gone through the student section, and now they don't know where to go? Because as we've already said, you have a decent black book.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I love networking. I'm a big networker, and I'll find ways to network anywhere. And one of the ways I did that, not when I was starting out, because I'm not sure it even existed when I was starting out, but LinkedIn is an underused tool. And you don't need to have incredible connections to get started on LinkedIn. You just set yourself up a profile and off you go. And I've made many connections on LinkedIn that have led to actual paying business or opportunities in the UK or in other parts of the world. And it's very quick and easy to make those introductions. I think if you're starting from a blank sheet, that's a great way to get in there and do it off your own back. And once you start building up those circles, you can quickly build yourself a network. And then once you've started talking to people, one thing leads to another. But I think it's just important to put yourself out there, put yourself above the parapet and be confident, let your voice be heard, and have an opinion, share your opinions on LinkedIn and let people see that you know what you're talking about. And things will happen for you. But I'm a big believer in getting off your backside and talking to people and not waiting for something to come to you. So I would say as a very way to start that process, get on LinkedIn and absolutely smash it, go nuts on it. And don't be afraid to approach big names. The big names are out there on LinkedIn, right up to Formula One racing drivers, former F1 drivers and team bosses. You can get to them. And if you work hard enough, you can find an email address. There's things like Email Hunter out there. You can get it. I bet Jenny's email address is on there. Mine certainly is. But it's platforms like that can get you somewhere. And if you work hard enough at it, you will get contacts and you will build up a network.
Jack.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I'd started LinkedIn back in but then I don't really use it much anymore personally. But I think it's a really, really useful tool. And for me, it was the emailing people that was the big thing, to be honest. Just finding, no matter how much you tweet, and no matter how good your tweets are, and if you do a little show reel or something and put it on as the little pin tweet on your Twitter page, nobody's going to find it. I don't believe. You have to show it to people. People aren't out there looking at everybody's Twitter account to see if there's a good person out there doing the job that they are wanting someone to do, or even the job that they don't know they want someone to do yet. So I totally agree with Tim with the proactiveness. From my point of view, when I decided, I'd quite like to actually be a commentator, I emailed 5, 6, 7, 10, all the commentators I could think of, like in England, and some of them replied. So Ben Edwards, for example, who does the Channel 4 commentary, used to do, he replied and said, sounds good, get in touch with your local circuit. So I did. A couple of years later, I emailed Ben again saying, thank you for your support. I've been doing it for a couple of years. I'm now doing this, this, and this. Here's a little thing. And he said, great, well done. And then 6 months later, he couldn't do a job on the GT World Championship. And so he put me forward to the boss. And that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have tried to get in touch with him. And I tried to get in touch with other people who'd never replied to my emails, no matter how many I sent. I nearly said his name then, but maybe not.
Do it.
It's David Addison. David Addison never replied to my emails. David Addison. But now we're chums, so it's fine. But yeah, not a single reply from that mother. But yeah, that's the way to get out. And you have to, like I said, like Tim says, you have to be visible. You have to get into it. If you want to write for Autosport magazine, for example, find the national editor of Auto. All the contact details are in Autosport. Find their contact details. Send them an email with an example of your work, something you've written, a race report on the last race or something like that. Say, look, this is what I can do. What do you think? Can you help me? Can you not help me? Autosport also, they used to have a young writers program. I don't know if they still do that anymore since it got taken over. But that's my advice. That was quite long. Sorry.
That's fine.
Can
your audio as well, just for the record, Jack. For someone who works in radio, is terrible.
It's dodgy.
It's dodgy.
Right.
I did try and send you a message, but there we go. Tim, you wanted to jump
Sorry,
back in?
Jenny, just something I wanted to pick up on that Jack was saying about emails and stuff, emailing people. One thing very quickly that you can do that many people overlook because they probably think it's too ridiculously easy is many important people have a website with a contact page. So for example, Mark Webber, who doesn't know me from anybody, I just went through his website, dropped him an email for his website. Do you want to come on the podcast? He doesn't know our podcast. He said yes, and we interviewed him last week. It can be as simple as that. It doesn't need to be a complicated process.
Do I sound any better now, or still terrible?
That's just your voice, mate.
Yeah, probably is. Yeah.
I think it's one of the questions. I think some of the questions that come in on the chat are a lot of people who are already journalists or want to be journalists, or photographers as well, and they're writing stuff already. And in the modern age, it's really easy to write something and post it up online and put photos out there. One of the things I used to do in a previous job is I used to be the person that commissioned articles on motor racing, and quite often I'm scouring around the world looking for an article, finding somebody in South Africa to write about a funny GT series that nobody knows anything out, or Brazil or New Zealand where we don't have any staff writers. So we're quite often looking for people who are writing that stuff. So if you want to be a journalist and work your way up, you need to have your stuff out there and have writing examples of your writing available. You need to have your pictures out on social media. I don't know what channels people used to post, not LinkedIn so much, but Instagram, they quite often have pictures on that. And it's just making yourself available and approachable for journalists, because quite often we're quite lazy when you're commissioning. You're looking for the easiest, right? I need those high-res pictures. I need that many words on that subject, and I don't really want to chase after anybody to get them. So it's not a case of don't wait for someone to email you, then have 3 weeks to write an article, come back. We want everything 5 minutes ago. So you need to have those high-res photos available on a downloadable form, and you need to have that writing available. And one thing that I will say, it's a little easy for some publications to fall into the trap of saying, look, we'll let you write for us for free to get accreditation, stuff like that. That's something I never did and don't really support, because unless it's like a really amateur level, grassroots series, if it's professional racing, you really should be getting paid for your work. And I think that's something you need to do. How do you set the rates? That's a much harder question. What I've always done is actually let the magazine decide the rates, and I'm probably undercharged quite often for that reason, but I get lots of work that way.
Sam, it's interesting you bring up the point about, you know, not having reporters everywhere for every series, because lots of you getting in touch to ask about, I live in Africa or I'm in America, do I need to move to get a career in motorsport media? But actually what you're saying is that you can create and forge your own career where you are without having to up sticks quite yet. By just providing people with insight into the motorsport where you live, because even in a small market, there's motorsport going on everywhere, isn't there? Am I wrong about that? Let me know on the Q&A if I'm massively wrong about that. But Rebecca, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to add, I totally agree with Sam about, you know, knowing your worth actually, and lots of places will try to get you to do things for free that you probably shouldn't. However, on the flip side, because of the internet now and everything that's available, what is available if you're starting out and you want to be a writer or a journalist is if you can blog, and whether that's on your own blog or something like a Drive Tribe or something, that automatically it helps you get experience and it gives you something to point people to. So I actually know that I took an intern on a few months ago who is watching, and she writes her own blog. And the first thing I did was go on to see if she could write. And so her doing that in her spare time, I literally was like, she can write, she has all the things that I'm looking for. And she had that, you know, that available, even though she probably wouldn't have got a paid job at the moment doing that because she was in university. So if you have the time and the inclination, the benefit of media nowadays compared to when all of us lot were coming up was there are platforms available for you to showcase what you can do, which didn't exist 20 years ago actually.
Well, that's what with my stuff, when I was emailing Ben Edwards and saying, oh, you know, please can I do this, or I want to be a commentator, I'd done a year of just esports commentating at home for fun, like no money, but you go with something to show for it. If you just go and say, hi, I want to be a commentator, the first question is going to be, well, can you commentate, or like, are you all right, or, you know, are you any good? And so if you have that already in your locker, then you're sort of one step ahead, like Sam said.
Jack Fenley has been in touch, and I wanted to answer this one because this is a good one. I said, I'm a first-year sports journalist student at UCLan. I love all things F1, but I'm not sure what sector of the industry I'd like to go into, whether it's radio, writing, presenting, etc. Is it beneficial to keep my options open, or should I pinpoint what I'd like to do sooner rather than later? I'll just say hello to Zarah, who has joined us. I will introduce you in just a moment. Let's answer Jack's question first. Who would like to shoot? Did I see Sam waving his hand? Go, Sam.
Yeah, don't specialise.
Yeah.
Do not specialise in radio or television or writing. Do as much of different things as possible, because a modern 21st century motorsport journalist will be expected to do all of the above. You're going to be expected to have stuff on YouTube. You're going to be expected to do stuff on radio. And of course, you're going to have to write and blog and do all of that stuff. So there's no point in specialising in one thing. Learn all of the skills, because they're just tools in a toolbox you're going to be reliant on.
1000%, Sam. Makes absolute sense. And that's one thing I was going to add, that in terms of, you may have a niche geographically or in terms of your interest, but what you have to remember is you as a human being have your own tone, your own style. You can't see it because it's you. It's like you can't see your nose because it's there all the time. But believe that if you've got something to say and you're interested, the way that you write or the way that you speak, you might need to nurture it, but it is you. So you will have your own voice and your own energies, and eventually it'll transmit and people see that that's your tone. So yeah, whether it's written, audio or video, just go for everything you can, because one of them will land and it'll lead to more of all of them. But just believe in yourself, because you're doing it for a reason.
Tim?
Yeah, I think I agree. I think in my world, it's similar. I think it's good to be able to be versatile. To put a slightly different spin on it, I guess, it's always, it can be good to be very single-minded about whatever it is that you're planning to do. So if in my instance, sports marketing and sponsorship, that particular niche for me was all I wanted to do when I started working in motorsport, and I knew that that was my area. So I honed in on that one thing and just made it my absolute goal to work in Formula One and do sponsorship. And that's what I ended up doing. So I think, yeah, the journalism side of things, absolutely, you know, have a broad brush. I think for other things, having a very focused and pinpoint accuracy on what you want to do can help too.
If you are watching and you'd like to get a question into a specific member of the team, you can use the Q&A, and a few of you have started to do it, which that's good. And you've actually put who your question is for, and obviously our panelists can actually reply to you as well if they go into the Q&A. So if you have a specific question, I know I'm going to inundate everybody now, but please do feel free to get in touch on the Q&A, and we'll try and answer them as much as we can before we finish the session in about 15 minutes. But I'd love to introduce you all to Zarah Al-Kudcy, who works for F1, and we're going slightly outside our remit, but because she works for F1 and she's the most amazing person, well, all of you guys that are on the panel are amazing, I wanted to introduce you to her. So she is head of commercial partnership at F1. So Zarah, would you do us a favour just saying kind of what your job is and how you ended up working for F1?
I can, and actually the previous question is also a perfect segue into this answer, because I'm essentially a failed sports journalist. So I went to uni, decided I wanted to be a sports journalist, did my NCTJ, came out, couldn't even get a job on my local paper, and ended up switching to the other side of the mix zone in a communications role. Who knew? I did not even know what a comms role was at the time. Kind of loved that, and then moved more into marketing, and realised, oh, actually, maybe I should have done marketing because I really enjoy storytelling and promoting stuff. And then that's brought me through to and none of that actually was in motorsport. So that was sort of rugby, cricket, athletics. So when Sam talks about being a generalist, like I am the definition of one. And then that brought me into the world of motorsport. So, you know, I sit in our commercial team. I look at predominantly new business, but also working with our current partners. And actually I have to say that, you know, the comms piece and that storytelling stuff has been a massive foundation for where I am now. And I think it's, you know, I've seen a few questions. I've been trying to answer questions while I've been sat here, and I gave up after 7 because they kept flying through. But, you know, I think sort of Kirsty asked a question, Kirsty McDermott asked about, she said that she's currently where she works is nowhere near motorsport, but I'd love to see how I could get into marketing within there. And I think sort of where I just, with my own pathway and experience, it's don't worry too much about the getting into the motorsport bit. You know, sort of build your expertise in the marketing, see what you really love, and then hopefully that will bring you the opportunities into motorsport. You know, our director of marketing at Formula One, Ellie Norman, she has spent, I think, about a decade working at Virgin. So she is a massive petrol head, but she hasn't worked in motorsport until she got into this role, but she probably wouldn't have got this role without the work that she had done at Virgin. So, you know, your paths take you different ways into your end goals.
Zarah, a lot of questions coming in at the moment are related to coronavirus and the fact that it's really difficult to get work experience with anybody because nobody's letting anybody in. So what advice do you as panelists have for people who are desperate for work experience, especially with, you know, schools and universities in such a strange position at the moment? How do people try and get that foot in the door, do you reckon?
I mean, I think your webinar alone is a good example of how we've all changed the way that we work. And I would like to see, and from what I've heard, there's a lot of people that are looking at doing more remote placements and apprenticeships and internships. So I think it's you know, it's definitely something we've been looking at, and hopefully we'll have some news on that in the future. But I actually think it's going to open up opportunities to be able to have remote working. And hopefully provide more opportunities for people.
I agree with Zarah on that, and I think what we've seen is when coronavirus hit big time and everything dried up, you know, the sponsors were looking at pulling out of all sorts of different things, and you know, marketers were panicking and people going on furlough. As things have progressed and people have got used to this, I hate saying the new normal, but the new normal, brands and agencies and consultancies have adapted, and now so much stuff is digital. I mean, look at the Extreme E launch the other day, which was in a completely virtual environment, and agencies and teams and brands are starting to recruit again. At Right Formula, we've taken on a new member of staff recently who has joined us because we've pivoted to digital activations almost across the board. but with those digital activations and the learnings that come with that, we're starting to get better at it. Brands are starting to understand it more, and the market is settling. So there is still opportunity out there. It's just different to how it was previously.
I think this industry is all about being resourceful, no matter which sector you're in. And the people who are all around me on this screen are people who have succeeded because they haven't taken no for an answer. They've kept banging on doors. And I think the most important thing to say is, you may or may not agree with me, but if you want to get into motorsport, it's probably not because you want to be rich and famous, because there is such a small amount of people who get into this gig and make it to the very top. And you can see, you know, Jake Humphries is an amazing success story, but not everyone is going to be Jake. And Jake had to work really hard, and now he's got his own company and he's still working really hard. So my biggest piece of advice would be, you've got to graft. No matter what bit of the industry you want to go into, you will not get a free ride. You're going to have to work really hard. Despite what Sam said, a lot of the time you are going to have to take free work at the beginning of your career to get experience, to gain the hours that you need for all the relevant work that you're going to hopefully get in the future. But Jack, I just wanted to come to you, because when it comes to commentary, I think everybody sees commentary as a really glamorous role, and you know, it's fascinating, and it is fascinating. But how can people get in from a grassroots level? Are there opportunities for people to do commentary themselves?
Well, I think that's the thing that we need to sort of explicitly say, is that I don't think any, or well, maybe Banksy, but like most of us don't come straight into Formula One when you start with motorsport. Like, you start at the rallies that Sam was talking about. You know, I'm on the public address commentary at a 750 Motor Club event at Mallory Park for a year. Oh, were you there? Were you? Yeah. You know, all that kind of thing. And you can't just go into Formula One. And I think that's where I was able to progress quite quickly personally, because I was aware of those things, right? So if you want to be a football commentator, you don't go, right, I'm going to email BBC One and say, hello, please can I commentate on Match of the Day? There's an awareness that you still, I mean, maybe if you're feeling brave, but there's an awareness that you've got to start at the lower levels, at grassroots, in non-league or whatever, or your local paper, and work your way up. And it's exactly the same in motorsport. Some people do fall straight into the sort of big time. Let's say Alex Jakes, who does Formula 2, he'd never done any motorsport before he did Formula 2, and good on him, lovely boy. But you know, he's sort of a rarity on that front. So the sim racing is a place to start, and then you contact your local racetracks, see if they will have you along to shadow for a day. You go and stand in the commentary box at Snetterton with a commentator for a day. This is what I did. A guy called Chris Hartley let me then commentate on one race on Formula 4s. He was like, oh, okay, you were all right. You can come back next week and we'll give you 50 quid. And then it kind of goes on from there. So you can't just walk into Formula One, basically. And so it's finding the opportunities outside of Formula One that are just as rich and cool and kind of more fun, honestly, than Formula One. I would say I've had jobs outside of Formula One that I enjoy more than the Formula One job I have now, even though I really, really enjoyed it and I love working with Jennie Gow. But like, honestly, there's some where the work is a little more enjoyable. But yeah, you won't walk straight into Formula One. So finding those lower opportunities is the key, I think, Sam.
Okay, I think everybody wants to talk. So let's go Neil, Rebecca, Tim, Sam.
I think just quickly, I mean, that's the key thing. Is this is like anything, like learning an instrument or being good at sport. Practice is everything. So whether you're doing it privately in your own room or having a YouTube channel or however you're doing it, if you grow in the dark, sometimes it's easier to then appear kind of fully formed. But just practice, just getting better, and then everything you do on the chain to getting where you want to go, you will learn from. So every step of the way, just keep doing it, and you get rejections, you don't get praise, you don't do it for the strokes, do it because you want to do it. And then eventually something will click and you go, oh, I've learned so much, I can bank all of that, and then I move on. And you can't see it as you're going through it, but everything you do is worthwhile, and you're learning the skills, you're growing the muscle memory to get better at it.
Thanks. Yeah, and I was going to say, yeah, I went about it completely backwards. I was like World Rally Championship and then Formula One. And then I went back and did Formula 3, GP2, loads of the lower formula, you know, the feeder series and the lower formula. And it was absolutely brilliant. And then as sort of time's gone on, I've kind of, you know, I do lots of different things now, and Formula E is a really big thing for us. And I do GT stuff. And that stuff is, like Jack said, sometimes more fun. You know, we get to be incredibly creative and resourceful and try, you know, sometimes you have like less budgets, or not sometimes, all the time, you have less budgets to play with in those types of formula. So you have to be clever about it. And that can be so rewarding. And actually, there is not 1% of me that has any desire to work 100% in Formula One. I love the fact that I have that breadth across championships, and there's still things that I want to do. You know, I'd like to do some work in Indy. I think that would be really, really fun. And I think, actually, I know this webinar is called You Want to Work in F1, but actually it should be motorsport, because there are so many amazing things out there and opportunities, and F1 isn't actually everything. Yes, it's always considered the pinnacle and it's incredible, but there's lots of other incredible things as well. And so don't kind of close your minds off to those other opportunities.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with Rebecca, and you know, you mentioned IndyCar there. I'm a massive fan of IndyCar, and from a sports marketing perspective, IndyCar and NASCAR as well do an amazing job with sponsorship. Yeah, so well worth looking at those avenues. One thing I wanted to mention just on the journalistic front is, again, going back to just pure hard work and having a passion for what you do. So there's a young chap who I think is on here somewhere, Kai, who is probably familiar to one or two of the other panelists, and Kai is a brazen self-publicist and will bowl into any situation. He's hugely passionate about commentary, wants to be in the journalism game. And when I was working at Silverstone, we had an appearance with Lando Norris, and Kai burst in and said, "I'd like to interview Lando, please." I didn't know who Kai was. He interviewed Lando, and off he went on to the next driver. And he's done that off his own back, and he's making inroads. He's got himself BBC Young Journalist of the Year, and doing really well. So I think it's those kind of characters who are going to go out and work hard and make it their goal to get these opportunities.
And we are running out of time. We've got a couple of minutes left. And I wanted to find out what you think is the best piece of advice you could give to somebody from all of the things we've spoken about. Zara, did you want to come in on the last point as well? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, I think sometimes people are probably sitting here looking at us going, what do you know? Like, you've all made it. You can tell me it's all hard work. I can guarantee, because I'm relating to a lot of these comments around either just finishing school, university, or have finished and looking for a break in journalism. Like, genuinely, I think it took me a year to find something. And within that, I was flying to Dublin, staying in a hostel to do work for Setanta, writing for Eurosport.com, running for BFBS radio. And I didn't end up as a journalist. But at the time, I thought I wanted to do it. And actually, that opened up a load of networks and contacts that I came back to years later. So I think my one piece of advice would be, do not give up and don't lose heart, because it will be frustrating. It really will be, but the payoff is worth it if it's what you really want to do.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Neil, you're next.
I think don't give up could be the headline of this. Keep going is a brilliant advice there from Zara. But I think for me, especially now, I mean, I think I would have my self-esteem would have just crumbled into a tiny tissue if when I started my career, the internet and social media was what it is now. So I think you have to just be really single-minded about going for it, and don't have kind of grass greener syndrome. Don't allow sort of jealousy or, oh, I should be there, that person's overtaken me, oh, that person. Never allow that kind of thing to cloud your sort of opinion of yourself, your self-esteem, or your value of what you can do, because people are going to overtake you. Like people like Kai are always going to sort of rocket to the front, and then, you know, there'll be people who will sort of meander their way around. Everyone finds their own path. So all I would say is just ignore the negative, everyone shouting around you, and just kind of go, I know what I'm doing, and I'll get there eventually, or quite quickly, either way. And the other thing I would say is, if you've got a YouTube channel, how do you think that producers in television look for new presenters? they search on YouTube. So make sure all your tags are correct. Put everything in all your descriptions so that people will find you. If you've got a voice about motorsport and you're, you know, under 25, that's who all producers are looking for. So just make sure your YouTube channel has all the correct information in it and we'll find you.
Neil is always telling me that, by the way, and he helps me do some of my YouTube stuff because I'm hopeless. And he's like, you haven't put tags in. Put tags in. Rebecca.
Yeah, I feel really bad. We have like all these questions and I don't know how we have no chance of answering them. I don't know if there's a way that we can figure that out afterwards. We'll try. Yeah, for me, it was always more like if a lot of these people are obviously leaving school and university and you're maybe thinking about what people are looking for. Me personally, I'm not looking for someone that wants to work in motorsport. I'm looking for someone that wants to be a PR or an event specialist. And those skills are transferable, but I'm not looking for someone that's just wants to be in motorsport. They don't care what they do. They have to be passionate about the role that they're looking for. So kind of, yeah, take that time to find out what you're actually passionate about and what you want to do, because there's a lot of, this is not a glamorous industry. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of sacrifices in your lives to make these kind of careers happen. So it has to be worth it. You have to be passionate about what you're doing.
Excellent. Jack?
Just sort of really echoing everybody else. The passion is the most, and don't be afraid to not be passionate about something. So I did a degree in English, so my writing is okay. And I think, sometimes I'd like to I'll do a bit of writing. I'll write a little blog or something. And right now I've got this idea for a piece I want to write. Never going to write it because I don't have that passion there. I think I want to have that passion. But when it comes down to sitting in front of the laptop, you're like, nah, this is not for me, this journalism lark. Commentary is sort of everything to me. So yeah, don't be afraid of not feeling passion for a certain element of motorsport. Like I can't think of anything more boring than being a motorsport journalist. Like honestly, like I look at, and I have friends who are motorsport journalists at like Scott Mitchell and Ed Straw and all those people at the race, and Sam I know, and nah, that's not for me. I love motorsport, but I've got no interest in doing that. So that's fine as well. You know, you got to find what you do want to do. And commentary specifically, the best piece of advice I was ever given is you're not paid by the word. There we go.
So that brings us nicely to telling Jack to shut up. Sam.
Yeah,
I volunteer by the word. That's what, yeah.
I mean, just echoing what a lot of people saying. You know, one of the things that we've heard in all of these comments is my mind keeps getting sucked back to those days that we've all had, where your feet are soaking wet, you're soaking wet, it's freezing cold, you're hungry, you've got hours left to do of work, you're miles away from home, and you're just thoroughly fed up of the whole thing. There's an awful lot of days like that to come in pretty much all of these roles. Winter testing can be pretty horrific, but there's some really, it sounds a little bit world's smallest violin, but trust me, when you're coming up and you're not necessarily doing the big series that you really want to aspire to, and you're doing something much lower level, that's where you're really proving yourself. You're getting through that, and it's that grafting. For me, it was various Welsh forests in the Rally Championship and the paddock at Snetterton. And actually, for me, the event I still go back to and I still do the commentary on was one of the first I ever did is Formula Student. And I started doing that at an airfield in Leicestershire at Bruntingthorpe, and now it's at Silverstone. I think it's going to move again soon. And I love doing that event, and I love doing the commentary on that. Every year I go along and I'm just really happy to be there. And so the question came up, what event do you most look forward to each year? I have to say it's actually Formula Student. It's not Formula One or any of the other events. It's just this brilliant, wonderful student-based event. And if you're still a student, get involved with your team, because that is such important experience that you don't get if you don't go to uni.
Tim.
Yep, this is a lot quicker than it sounds, so bear with me. So I have an 8-step process with this. One, that everyone said, have a passion for it. Obvious one, everyone's covered that. Work harder than everybody else, and I've always stood by that. And that doesn't mean always working more hours. I mean more efficiency, more accuracy, more detail, more empathy. Show enthusiasm. I've never been the most qualified. My qualifications are crap, but I try to be the most enthusiastic. Be daring, make your voice heard, stand out, show you have passion. Be punctual, early is on time. Learn the industry off your own back. There are loads of webinars, publications, blogs, case studies. Immerse yourself in it. Take every measured opportunity, even if it doesn't feel relevant. you won't believe what can happen when you say yes. And don't listen to the negativity, or you can't do that, or anything like that. Of course you can. People who are jealous of your goals and who are jealous of people with ambition will always be negative towards you, so ignore it.
Amazing. Well done. That was good stuff, Tim. We are out of time, and the press conference is now starting in approximately 8 minutes, which means quite a few of us have to disappear and go and do some work, what they call work. Sam doesn't, it's fine. I will try and find a way to make sure we can answer your questions, because I'm very aware that there are over 100 questions, and I don't want you to feel as if we've ignored you. So I will work on that. In the meantime, maybe if you can use the hashtag MMW2020 on Twitter, for those of you on Twitter, then we can have a look through that hashtag and we can try and help you and answer. That's what I think is the short-term answer. I'll look at a better way of doing it for the questions that we've had in. And for my two penneth, when it comes to a word of advice, I think it's surround yourself with the people that you trust. And I can say that because all of the people on the screen are people that I've worked with, that I acknowledge as being really good at what they do, but I trust them. And if you surround yourself with good people and nice people who you can get a genuine opinion from, don't worry about the noise on social media. Don't worry about the backlash that you may face if you say something extraordinary sometime. The opinions that really matter are your friends and your family. So if you're having a bad day and you're feeling a bit low, then you can always pick up the phone. We don't do it very often anymore, but pick up the phone and have a chat with somebody, a proper chat, and talk things through and work out your plan for the future and how you want to make your dreams become reality. And you can do it, but just surround yourself with good people, I would say. Rebecca, you've come off mute. Did you want to say something, or you've just come off mute?
No, I just came off mute in case there was a collective goodbye in a moment.
Oh, let's do that. That would make sense, wouldn't it? Let's do a collective goodbye. Everyone can come off mute. Thank you so much to everybody for joining. We will be running this on YouTube. So if you want to tell your friends, then you could do that, pass on the link, shout about it. And hopefully this will be the first of many webinars that we can do to try and introduce you to different elements of working in motorsport, not just Formula One and not just media, but lots of different places, because there are so many jobs out there. There are so many possibilities for you. And I want to really try and help you get to where you want to be. And I think we all do. So for now, I'll say goodbye. I hope you've enjoyed it. Send us your comments. Let us know what you thought. Oh, I haven't done the poll. Hang on a minute. Quickly, poll. Oh. I know, right. So 30% want to be in journalism, 21% in comms, 14% in PR, marketing and sponsorship 22%, and commentary 13%, bringing up the rear.
As usual.
He's gone.
He's gone.
He stormed out in a rage.
What a waste of my time.
We're talking about, Jack. Don't get disheartened.
Yes,
Yeah.
keep going.
Surround yourself with friends. Be
Be
passionate.
Journalist.
Or become a drummer. Right, from all of us, I'll say thank you for your time. Thank you for your inspiration. For all you people that want to be in motorsport, goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.